I want you to picture this. It's 2010 and you're playing on your Wii in the living room, and you're up way later than you should be. The game you're playing is Mario Kart Wii, and you're playing through the Shell Cup. Everything is going well until you get to that track, Ghost Valley 2. Before the race starts, it seems like just another day in the office, going through another one of those retro tracks, but when the race starts, something's off. For some reason, this track is different compared to the rest of the tracks in the game. It's seemingly a lot darker than all the other ones and is almost entirely devoid of life. Like this track exists in a dark abyss that threatens to swallow you whole. Okay, melodrama aside, the rest of the track has this air of unease to it that makes me feel like if I fall behind the pack, something terrible is gonna happen to me. And what does not help with that feeling of unease is the music sounding like the distant hollow echo of forgotten souls looping in a hypnotic and unnerving rhythm that is just off enough to put me on edge. Being afraid of Ghost Valley 2 and Mario Kart Wii when I was 6 years old was my first exposure to horror elements in a video game. Okay, now you can point and laugh at me all you want for being so viscerally afraid of a Mario Kart track, but I feel like it's a very universal experience growing up playing video games to be scared by something that's really not intended to be all that scary. I understand that being so scared of this track is just the product of my child brain having an overactive imagination, but still, I would be lying if I said I did not turn the lights on every time I accidentally played through this track. Well, it's precisely that dumbass childhood fear of Ghost Valley 2 that ended up shaping my appreciation for the horror genre. Horror exists because people love the adrenaline rush that comes from getting the crap scared out of them, but I think horror in video games taps into a deeper, more visceral level of fear that other mediums simply can't replicate. Sure, a horror book or movie can be terrifying, no doubt, but in those mediums, you're just an observer, watching as horror protagonists do what they do best, making the worst possible decisions. Oh, you mean this tape is cursed and watching it means I'm guaranteed a slow, horrible death? Sick, let me go grab some popcorn. However, in a horror game, you're not just watching dipshit McGee make terrible decisions, you are dipshit McGee making just as terrible or debatably even worse decisions. This extra layer of interactivity adds a level of anxiety and panic that only video games can deliver. You're not just in the passenger seat along for the ride, you're the one in the driver's seat actively speeding through a school zone. Real fast, I want to mention two things before we get into the meat of this video. First off, full disclosure, I did get the idea for this video from Nakey Jakey's video, Horror in Video Games, which will be linked in the description. I highly recommend you check it out because I personally really like his content, hence why I'm plagiarizing it. Secondly, I'm going to be talking about these games shown on screen, so if you care about minor spoilers, this is your one and only warning. With that being said, my first taste of actual horror in a video game was when I was playing on my stepbrother's PlayStation 3, playing The Last of Us, and getting to the basement section in Pittsburgh. And at this point in the game, the player feels pretty confident. I mean, after all, you've seen every kind of infected the game can throw at you. There's no situation this game can put you in that you don't know how to handle. Or so you thought, because the second you pick up the key card to get out of the basement, a new type of enemy spawns. Stalkers. I can distinctly remember sitting in this security room for what felt like an eternity, realistically probably only a couple of minutes, because I was too terrified to step outside. What makes Stalkers so unique compared to the other infected in The Last of Us is that Stalkers will actively hide from you, lying in wait to ambush you. Unlike other enemies, they're also invisible to the player's listening mode, a crucial gameplay mechanic you have come to rely on. Suddenly, you're forced to depend solely on sight to find them, amplifying the tension and stripping away any sense of control you had. For first-time players, Stalkers are genuinely terrifying, and they're honestly pretty difficult to deal with, making for some intense moments. Too bad that they only appear in 2 combat arenas throughout the entirety of the game. Subnautica opens with the player barely making it to a life pod after the spaceship you're on explodes in orbit of an alien planet. As you enter the atmosphere, a piece of metal knocks you unconscious, and when you regain consciousness, you're faced with a fire inside your life pod. After extinguishing it, you get your first look at planet 4546b, a vast alien world completely covered by an endless ocean. From the very beginning, Subnautica establishes a sense of isolation, leaving you alone to survive in this hostile alien environment. Okay, I'm a level with you here. So speaking as someone who has thalassophobia, if you don't know what that means I'm piss scared of the ocean and deep water in general. Subnautica is quite literally my worst nightmare. I mean, the ocean itself is already scary enough, but an alien ocean? Yeah, I'm good. The safe shallows feel manageable. You gather resources, craft tools, explore the colorful, relatively calm environment, but as you venture further into the unknown, the true scale of the game's world and its dangers become apparent. The first instance that comes to mind is when the player has to make their way to the Aurora to repair their drive core, so that radiation doesn't kill everything on the planet. Just like in The Last of Us, Subnautica at this point in the game has lulled you into a false sense of security, making you think that you can handle whatever this game throws at you. I mean, the worst thing you've seen up to this point are sand sharks, stalkers, and maybe a crash fish. All in all, are pretty easily dealt with, so going to the Aurora in your head is probably just going to be a cakewalk. But as you approach the Aurora, everything changes. The water becomes dark and murky, and that bright ambient music fades away, leaving an eerie silence. Then in the distance, you hear it. A deep, echoing roar that gets louder with every second. It's a sound that's hard to place at first, but soon you learn its source. I am not ashamed to admit that the first time I had an encounter with a Reaper Leviathan, I was almost in tears from how scared I was, and the fact that this game was able to get that visceral of a reaction from me is incredible design. Hollow Knight has a similar kind of moment that subverts the player's expectation, and it's in the godforsaken hellhole that is Deep Nest. Throughout the game, you use these little benches to fill out your map, heal, and save your progress. Hollow Knight conditions you to associate these benches with security and safety. However, Deep Nest takes this mechanic and betrays you. After getting through the aforementioned hellhole, you find yourself at the distant village, and once you enter, you're greeted by somewhat generic sounding video game town music, as well as villagers that insist you should take a rest from your long travels. Their insistence feels a bit strange, but nothing seems outwardly dangerous, and eventually, with little else to do in the area, you sit down on the bench that they offer. That's when everything changes. As soon as you sit down, you are immediately tied to the bench with webs. The music slows down and becomes distorted. In unison, the villagers all start to walk towards you as the screen slowly fades to black. When you wake up, you are wrapped in webbing in their nest where they were storing you with the intent on eating you later. If you look around after you get out of the den, you could find another room that is filled with bodies. And when you hit the corpses with the dream nail, you can see what appears to be the thoughts of these creatures' final moments. The dialogue reads, "They lied," and "not friends." Up until this point, the bench has been a safe, consistent element of the game, one that you relied on to feel, well, safe. By turning this mechanic on its head, the game forces you to question something you've been conditioned to trust. It's not a jump scare or a plot twist, but it is a subversion of the very mechanics that have provided comfort and safety throughout the game, which in my opinion is way more memorable than just some cheap jump scare. It's unsettling not just because of the twist, but because it makes you rethink how you interact with the game itself. Another example of a game that can make you rethink the way you interact with it is Undertale. The immensely popular Earthbound-inspired RPG is all about making you rethink the actions that you take in-game. While Undertale is largely comedic, it also features some horror elements, most notably in the hidden area known as the True Lab, accessible only in the pacifist route. After a sequence of going on a date with Alphys that ends with her getting tossed in the trash can, like the garbage she is, you can go back to her lab where her bathroom is unlocked. When entering the bathroom, it's revealed that it is actually an elevator that malfunctions as soon as you start going down, trapping you in the sub-lab. This area is a complete tonal shift from the rest of the game, which is made immediately apparent from the music. Undertale's music, with some exceptions, is usually pretty upbeat and cheerful, so the shift to something more ominous sounding is communicating to you, the player, that there is something wrong here. While making your way through the lab and reading some of the mildly unsettling journal entries, that's when you run into them, the amalgamations. The amalgamations are made from the corpses of monsters that melded together into strange and horrifying versions of themselves after Alphys attempted to bring them back to life by injecting them with determination. What makes the appearance of the amalgamations so effective is their introduction is just incredibly jarring. Up until this point, the game has used charming and whimsical characters to maintain a relatively lighthearted tone, and the amalgamations break that mold entirely. Their erratic behavior, unsettling designs, and honestly kind of tragic backstories combined with the unnerving music and dimly lit setting make for an incredibly uncomfortable experience. Where Undertale's horror lies in the unexpected, disturbing encounters, Majora's Mask takes a completely different approach, using atmosphere and existential dread to create a unique sense of unease. While I wouldn't say that Majora's Mask is a horror game, I would certainly argue that it is eerie. For a game touting the rated E for everyone rating, Majora's Mask is surprisingly dark, dealing with some rather heavy subject matter. The general plot is that Skull Kid, possessed by the power of Majora's Mask, is using its power to pull the moon from orbit and sending it hurtling into the town of Termina. The moon is set to collide with the town in 3 days' time, and Link must use the Ocarina of Time, a magical instrument capable of rewinding the clock to figure out how to stop the moon from smashing into the Earth. What makes this game so haunting isn't just the apocalyptic threat quite literally hanging over your head, it's the pervasive sense of existential dread that permeates throughout the entirety of the game, particularly in how it explores the reactions of Termina's inhabitants as they face their impending doom. For example, the Swordmaster, who just a few days ago was boasting about how he's going to cut the moon in half, in his final moments he's in his hidden room of his dojo trembling in fear, to the head carpenter who the entirety of the 3 days is denying that the moon is going to crash into the Earth, is still in denial as the moon is quite literally staring down at him, and an older sibling letting their younger sibling drink alcohol so they aren't conscious during their final moments. The game provides a range of deeply human responses to the inevitability of death. These reactions feel raw and unsettling, making the player reflect on how people would cope with the end of the world. The final day specifically instills this feeling of complete and utter hopelessness. Nowhere is that feeling better exemplified than in the music of the final day, where the score sounds somber and resigned, like the game itself has accepted that it's over, which is really fucked when you remember that this is a kid's game. And honestly, it's probably why it's one of my favorite entries in the series, solely for the way that it can play on your primal fear of time running out. Resident Evil is a series that needs no introduction. If you clicked on this video, you know what Resident Evil is. From its inception, the series has combined elements of survival horror, body horror, and jump scares with grotesque creatures and environments to scare the absolute shit out of the player. The earlier entries in the series were universally well received, with their fixed camera angles, tank controls, limited resources, and disturbing imagery. The formula was working really well for them until Capcom decided they didn't want to make money anymore, so Resident Evil 5 and 6 shifted towards more action-oriented gameplay, sacrificing the horror that made the series iconic. In these games, the once ominous threat of zombies and bioweapons is overshadowed by action set pieces, culminating in scenes like Chris Redfield punching a boulder in an active volcano. Resident Evil 7 marked a return to form for the series, shifting back to its roots of survival horror, but now with the added twist of being in first person. The switch to first person enabled this game to make players feel more immersed by going for a more grounded and subtle form of horror. The prologue alone is, without a doubt in my mind, the scariest part of the game, for the sole reason of how real everything feels. No crazy bioweapons, no zombies, just an intimate story of a guy looking for his missing wife in rural Louisiana. The Baker family guest house is rife with dread and has moments of both psychological horror and body horror. Something that I thought that was really creative that they did in the prologue was when you explore the house as Ethan, you find a tape that you then put into a VCR, which then starts a segment where you play as Clancy Jarvis, who is a cameraman filming for a Zach Baggins Ghost Adventures type show. Long story short, the tape ends with Clancy finding a secret passageway that has the corpse of the producer and ends with Clancy getting attacked by the figure you saw in front of the house earlier. Oh, and one other thing that had me really freaked out the first time I played was having to go down the basement steps while hearing a possessed Mia breathing super raspy. You know, like, I'm not stupid. I know exactly how this is gonna end. It's gonna end with Gorgon like, ah, boo! And, you know, me getting scared because I got jump scared. But, like, the fact that the game forces me to walk down those steps, it's just so much worse. That moment really encapsulates why I love Resident Evil 7. It doesn't just rely on shocking visuals or sudden scares. It builds up an atmosphere of dread that feels both oppressive and inescapable. By forcing players to confront the unknown, the game amplifies tension in ways that feels personal and relentless. I had planned to talk about more horror games, but I'm already posting this video way behind schedule, so I'm just gonna go ahead and end it here. Fun fact, this video was supposed to come out before Halloween. If you made it this far into the video, I just want to say thank you for watching and that I'm incredibly thankful for the support you guys showed on the Punch-Out video. I believe it's at time of recording this, it's at like 4,000 views, which is absolutely insane for my channel size, and I could not be, again, more thankful. I'm not really sure what I want to do for the next video, so if you guys have any suggestions, leave them down in the comments, because I religiously read all of them. Shout out to that one guy I responded to within 5 minutes of him commenting. Oh, before I forget, I also have a Twitter and Instagram now, so check those out. Links will be in the description. Just want to say one more time, thank you for watching. Hope you guys have a great rest of your holiday season. That's the video. Bye.